Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women's Soccer Show Gold Cup Quarterfinals Special. I'm Sara, and in this special extra episode, I was joined by Amy O'Connor to break down all 4 quarterfinal matches from this past weekend. We wanted to give you full coverage and analysis of all 4 games ahead of the semifinals on Wednesday, so please enjoy as Amy and I dive into each game one at a time. Hello, Amy, and welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to talk women's football all around the world today.
Always. And I know you've been watching all of the Gold Cup games. We FaceTimed at halftime of the Canada game. So I actually know your thoughts on that already, but I'm excited to jump into all of this with you. Hopefully you didn't have too many beers yesterday during those final games while you were watching football all day.
No, I kept it to a minimum 2 beers, and then I had some non-alcoholic so I can remember everything that happened in the game. So we're good. We're good.
All right, so we had the quarterfinals of the Gold Cup this past weekend, or the W Gold Cup, as people have been calling it. Let's just get right into it. We had 2 quarterfinal games on Saturday, 2 quarterfinal games on Sunday. We've got our semifinalists, and let's just go chronologically. We're going to talk all 4 of these games. It's so much fun. It's tournament football, everybody. I just love it. So we're going to go, as I said, chronologically, and that starts with the first Saturday matchup. Canada took on Costa Rica, and they took the win 1-0. They will move on to the semifinals and face the United States on Wednesday. But let's get into these games here. I feel like we need to talk about Canada's performance in this because it has to be said, Canada were flying through the group games, and notably, Canada did have the easiest group. Like, let's just put that out there. I think that's not a biased opinion. I think that is a factual opinion. And they flew through the group stages, 9 points, 13 goals scored, 0 goals allowed, 3 wins, no losses, absolutely flew, and then took on Costa Rica once again. These 2 teams were in the same group together, and in the previous meeting, they met in the third of 3 group games. So these were like playing back-to-back games. Canada beat Costa Rica 3-0 in the third group stage game, and then just 1-0 here in the quarterfinal. And they didn't look like the team that we'd seen throughout the group stages. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think they didn't look as free-flowing as they were in the group stages. They struggled to really break down Costa Rica. And obviously Costa Rica was playing a low block. They made it difficult for Canada to make any sort of inroads in behind or any sort of penetration through the middle. And it was a frustrating performance, I would say, for Canada. We got to, if you listening on Paramount Plus, you actually got to hear some of what Bev Priestman was trying to tell them, some coaching tactics, which was really interesting to hear how she was trying to break down the low block. But it just wasn't successful. I thought it was kind of a stale performance. It's hard to beat a team after you've played them, right? You've played them once, so they kind of know a little bit more about you and what to expect. And, you know, Costa Rica, obviously not as highly ranked as Canada. We expect a lot from Canada, but I thought Costa Rica were really good. I thought they were organized. I thought that Rocky Rodriguez, their captain, super hard work rate in the middle of the pitch, all over the pitch, really broke up a lot of plays, stopped many balls being, passed through the lines. So I was impressed by Costa Rica more so than, I was disappointed with Canada, but I was more impressed with Costa Rica.
I'm pretty equally impressed and disappointed across the board. And let's just say this 1-0 scoreline, this is in extra time. Evelyn Viens scored an extra time goal in the 104th minute. Canada took that 1-0 in extra time. And I think you're right with the point that, look, it is very hard to beat a team twice, and it's extra hard to beat them twice in a row. This is literally like, let's do it on the training pitch and allow Costa Rica to take notes about what we want to do to break them down, and then we'll play it again so they have those notes and they can make those adjustments. And credit to Costa Rica, that is exactly what they did. But what I'm disappointed in from Canada is the predictability of it. And I think we see this a lot. I've said before, it is no small feat to break down a low block. And when you have a good low block, I think it's of the most difficult tactically to do as an offense in soccer, or in football. So I want to give Canada some credit there. They were up against not only a team that literally had their tactics, but a very strong low block that's very difficult to like break down. But even like you said, when we could hear Bev Priestman talking about these tactics and what she wanted her team to exploit, I felt like they came back up out on the field and it was the same that we'd been seeing. It was predictable. There was nothing that they changed. And I was very much disappointed in that aspect of it from Canada.
Yeah, I think we also had an interesting interview, just to swing over to the US. I know we're going to talk about them in a bit, but we also had an interesting interview from Twyla Kilgore about the US and how they played against Mexico and they weren't brave enough to play balls through the lines. And I feel the same way about Canada. I just don't think they were brave enough to play balls through the lines. I think obviously you have to have a little bit of creativity, a little bit of magic, someone to spark you. And I didn't know where that was coming from with Canada either. I don't when I look at their squad, I don't think, wow, that player can change a game.
Yeah.
You know, like Jessie Fleming's a good player. I don't think she's gonna change a game for them though. I think Buchanan is a fantastic defender. Again, she's a defender. She's not going to change the game for them. If you're looking at somebody, I would say like Heitema could be somebody, but she was quiet. She didn't have a great game either. And, you know, Canada could have feasibly lost that game in the last minute with Kaylin Sheridan having to make an unreal save to deny Costa Rica. So, again, we're not just saying Costa Rica sat in a low block. They did sit in a low block, but then they got an opportunity. They went forward and they could have won it at the end. And it would have been like a sensational story had they won it. And you couldn't have denied them, saying that maybe they deserved it. They were disciplined. They had the opportunity on the break to score. And if they'd won it there, nobody could have said, well, Canada have only got themselves to blame, really, because they didn't create anything of note.
I think I agree with what you're saying that if Costa Rica had put that away, and quite honestly, I can't believe that they didn't, I would have absolutely said that they deserved to win this game. But I disagree in the fact that I would have equally said Canada shot themselves in the foot because with the amount of opportunities that Canada created, if you're not going to put a goal away, you are only shooting yourself in the foot because you are just leaving the door open for that other team to come and counterattack. You want to end a game quickly. 39 shots, 10 shots on target, 65% possession. I mean, they had almost 40 shots and you're not going to score a goal in regulation. I call that only having yourself to blame if they were to have lost this game. But I feel like we are being a little hard on Canada here. Sometimes in tournaments, you need ugly games, and that's just how it goes. Anybody that's ever won the World Cup has had a little bit of luck, has had an ugly game. And this maybe was just Canada's slight blunder after a strong group stage.
What were their percentage ratio of shots on target? So you said they had what, 40 shots?
39 shots, 10 on target. So
shots,
essentially
10
a
on target.
quarter
So
of their shots went on target.
I think that's also part of the problem, right? If you're only going to get a quarter of your shots on target, which is not great ratio, that needs to be addressed within your squad and your practice sessions. I mean, this is international football, and you know, I think that we texted about this. This is like Canada's 2020 Olympics. This screams of that, right?
I did say that. That's what they looked like. Yeah, but that's kind of what I mean by it's tournament play. And hey, if anything, Canada have proven that they can win a tournament, and it doesn't need to be pretty.
It definitely doesn't, and this was not pretty, but hopefully this will spur them on to have a better performance in the semi-final. I just think the performance needs to be a little bit better. Just tidy up the performance because they still haven't conceded a goal. So we'll say that defensively they're very solid. So it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be interesting. I feel like the last point I want to touch on Canada, and I hope this doesn't come off wrong, but you look at the group that they're in, Group C, Paraguay, Costa Rica, El Salvador. And then you look at the other groups. Group B has Brazil and Colombia. Group A has Mexico and the United States. Arguably, Canada is the only, top 10 team in this tournament that is headed into the semifinals and hasn't yet been tested. What would you say to that, and how is that a detriment to them heading into the game against the United States?
Well, I agree totally. They haven't had a stern test yet. I mean, this is the sternest test they faced against Costa Rica. But I think that also when you come up against the bigger teams, they don't play a low block. So it becomes more of an open game. Yeah, so the US are definitely not going to set up in a low block. We know that. So this is going to create opportunities for Canada also on the counter attack. So I
Can you
think
imagine?
this will be a more open game. And Canada will also be able to play a bit more football, than they had been able to play against Costa Rica because the US will allow that to happen. But I mean, I picked Canada to make it to the final. So based on
You
this
would. You
performance,
would.
uh, based on this performance, I think having watched the US yesterday as well, it might be a little bit of a reach for them, to be honest. If the US perform the way we know they can,
I can't
it will
wait to
definitely be a reach.
these teams, they don't like each other and they know each other very well. And when that happens, and when that happens in a semifinal, truly anything can happen. On to the second quarterfinal. Brazil took down Argentina 5-1. Woo. It was a stunning performance from a team that is arguably showing the strongest in the tournament so far. In my opinion, Brazil have been the most consistent team in this tournament, and they've showed up the strongest when they've showed up. And this is a team that, once again, you're not starting Adriana, you're not starting Ari Borges, you're not starting Jace. And as our commentary told us a million times, because all they wanted to do was talk about Tabinha, Tabinha also wasn't in the game. So this is a Brazilian team that, quite honestly, hasn't even been fielding their first team. And this is how strong they look. This is a Brazil team to be reckoned with. And I think we talked a lot about Brazil on the previous episode. So I don't think we need to dig too deeply into them right now. If you didn't listen, go back because we really rewind and talk about why they're so strong right now. But to make a long story short, this is a team that can score goals and has shored up the defense. And that defense is that piece that hadn't come together yet for Brazil and really is now. They are organized defensively and they have that Brazilian free flowing flair on offense.
Well, I think you mentioned that they're not playing their best 11, but what is their best 11 now? Because like all of these players that are coming in are doing fantastic jobs.
Yeah.
So is this actually their best 11 that they're putting out there? Who knows? Because the coach, like you said, he is in the Brazilian league and he's bringing in Brazilian players from that league. And
Yep.
these players also deserve the opportunity. They might not have got that look under Pia Sundhage because she's looking at it from a wider lens, right? She's not necessarily seeing the ins and outs of the Brazilian women's league because she's not been coaching in that league. Whereas this guy, yes, he's been involved in it for a long time. You talked about this before on last week's episode. And I think it's refreshing. It's refreshing that Brazil are bringing in these players. It's not stale anymore. We don't know what to expect because these are players that not many of us have seen play, right? I'll say that. But for myself, I've not watched the Brazil league in depth. So we say, okay, but this is not their strongest 11, but this may be their strongest 11 because these are the players that are doing it and putting the performances out there. And maybe it's time that Tabinha doesn't start. Maybe it's time that Jace doesn't start. These players don't necessarily make the best 11 for Brazil. It's about what makes the team the most cohesive. And that's what we're seeing is a cohesive unit from front to back. The only question mark I have over Brazil is the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper for me is not good enough. Not good enough. I don't know
couldn't agree more. We also talked
this...
about this last week. Luciana does not do it for me. Shaky across the board, shaky when the ball's at her feet, shaky, honestly, when she's taking shots. She's 36 years old. She's had a long, storied career, but it's time. It's wild that in this moment when you've got a head coach that's bringing in so much talent from across the domestic leagues in Brazil, then stuck in the net is a goalkeeper that frankly her time is done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Luciana is the best choice for Brazil. There has to be somebody out there. If we're bringing in all these field players who are very talented, there must be goalkeepers out there who are talented enough to come into this squad and push Luciana out at some point, I would say. But that would be the question mark for me, is whether she's good enough and whether that is detrimental to them in terms of winning this competition. We'll see. But the back line looks incredibly strong. Rafael is unreal. I still can't believe Arsenal let her go because she is an unreal centre back.
Yep.
And she's bossed it. She's bossed it from the back. She wins the ball. And even her footwork is just immense. You watch her, she's close control. She can break through the lines herself. She can play passes through the lines. So I think that's just really important that Brazil shored up that back line, and they seem to have done that. And they've been very impressive. And they've only conceded one goal, and that was against Argentina.
Argentina advanced as one of the number 3 teams. They were in Group A with Mexico, USA, and Dominican Republic, and they advanced third. They won one, drew one, and lost one in the group stage. Argentina, like you said, they've got a ways to go, but I do think right now Argentina are sitting in that zone. They're not where Colombia are. They're not where Brazil are, Mexico are, but they're playing better than a Panama, than an El Salvador. I'd argue that they would beat a Costa Rica, and they're on their way. I'm interested in what you said about Brazil and that, maybe this is their best 11. And I think that we talk a lot about how this tournament, yes, you get a trophy, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. What's great about this tournament is that this is a great moment for young players to get experience and for these teams to work out what does work for us, what formations, what personnel, so on and so forth. I think we might get our answer to what the best 11 is for Brazil in the semifinal and potentially final. As these games get more and more competitive, I'm curious to see if Elias, the head coach, does start, a Debinha, does start an Ari Borges, or if he does stick with this 11 that's been really good and consistent for him. And I think that will tell us everything we need to know.
Yeah, he's also interestingly rotated his center mids. Like, there's been a kind of like a carousel of midfielders coming in and out, which is, if he has that strength and depth in the center of the park, then we're looking at a Brazil that could be challenging on all fronts in the next couple of years for major competitions, the World Cup, the Olympics, all of those things.
100%. This is a Brazil. I mean, again, I'm not going to repeat everything that we talked about last week, but they were favorites for a lot of people in the World Cup, and their defense failed them. And now you've got a Brazil that shored up their back line, and they're looking, for as dangerous as they looked in the lead up to the World Cup last year, they're looking, I think, tenfold already more dangerous. Yeah. This is a scary prospect for everybody in the world. Keep an eye on Brazil. To the third of 4 quarterfinal games, and we're going to save the best for last. So we're going to head to Mexico versus Paraguay. Mexico took this 3-2. I think this was a shocking result. I'll say that specifically for me. I was doing a commentary gig. I was doing play-by-play. So this is the one game that I missed, which is why partially why, not the whole reason why I'm very happy to have you on, Amy, because I want to hear all about this. Mexico kicked it off with the scoring. They scored first in the 31st minute. They tucked away a second goal. It was 2-0 Mexico. And then it seems like, frankly, all hell broke loose. And when I was watching the first 20 minutes of it, what I got to see is it really did look like Paraguay were sitting in that low block and Mexico were just doing what they needed to do to break it down. And I felt like that might be how the game trended. Obviously, that might not be the case. So what went down in this game?
So Mexico came out strongest, and they looked like they were on the front foot, and they were causing the most problems. In Ovalle, they have this incredible talent. This player is going to be a world star. She's kind of like how Linda Caicedo broke through in the World Cup. This is her tournament, and I believe she's the top goal scorer right now in the competition. But when this player gets the ball, it's electric. It's something is going to happen, and that's exactly what it was. It was Ovalle's match. I mean, we'll talk a bit about Paraguay, but I every time she gets it, I'm always like, she's going to do something. She's going to do something. Something's going to happen. She's going to score. She's going to set somebody up. And so she opened the scoring with a really nice left-footed finish across the keeper. And quickly then, after the break, Mexico scored again. So it was 2-0. And that was fine. It went with the run of play, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then kind of Mexico sort of maybe took their foot off it a little bit, but Paraguay got a penalty pretty soon after Mexico scored their second goal, and it was a penalty. It was a blatant penalty, and I had some friends over, and we all sat here, and everybody was like, "She's gonna miss." Everybody just thought she's gonna miss, and it was kind of like she wasn't confident in the run up, and the penalty was really poor. It was kind of straight down the middle at the keeper. So the keeper saved it, and then the keeper saved the rebound as well. And so that then you thought, well, okay, then Mexico will go forward and score again. But no, Paraguay scored. And to make this game super interesting, and everybody in my household was like, "Oh, this game on! Like this is really exciting."
Yeah.
And then Paraguay really started to press and put some passes together. And to think at that point it could have been 2-2 if they'd scored the penalty, right? So then we were thinking this game is, going to be something special. And then of course Ovalle goes up the other end. She scores, and she was on such a tight angle, but she whipped it back into the goal with her right foot, first time finish. And it was just the mark of how much quality she possesses, that she could score from that angle. And at that point, it was just kind of like, Mexico not hanging on, I wouldn't say, but it was a really good game. And it was a great advertisement for Paraguay and what they could offer in this tournament that we haven't necessarily seen from them. So again, when you get to the knockout stages, it kind of changes things, right? It kind of changes the mentality of how people play and how people set up. And I really enjoyed watching this game, and I definitely enjoyed watching Ovalle.
I also want to point to Mayra Pelayo. She plays on the right wing. She plays for Tijuana, I think, in La Liga MX. Listen, this is a 27-year-old, played in La Liga MX for the majority of her career. And I just think her talent is being put on display. I know everybody's pointing to the other side, to the other wing, but the damage that she can do on the right side is I genuinely thought she was best player in this game in the 20 minutes that I got to see. But before we move on, I want to touch on Paraguay quickly because, this is a team that we all overlooked. We all underestimated. They came out second in their group, but they were in Group C with Canada. So when they beat Costa Rica and they beat El Salvador, I don't think anybody really thought too much about it. And then they took their only loss in the group stage to Canada, and coming in and playing Mexico, who came out first in their group over the United States. I think everybody, including myself, assumed that this was Mexico's for the taking and it would be just kind of a walkover. They've come off a win against the US. Of course, they could beat Paraguay, and so much credit here to Paraguay. And this really does speak to the larger picture that across the board, and we're going to sound like broken records, but this is such an indication from the bottom up, the level is raising. And there are no easy victories anymore. And this entire tournament is case in point. And I think that's so important to point to specifically in the Americas, because really in CONCACAF and the other South American nations that are joining this tournament that aren't part of CONCACAF, it's been a 2-3 team show. It's been Canada and the US. And in recent years, Brazil have kind of come into that. And then only this past year, Colombia have. But now it's not a 2-3 team show. This is a tournament, and truly anything can happen. And I think this game itself is really a perfect indication of that.
Yeah, number 50 ranked team in the world. They didn't play like a 50 ranked team in the world against Mexico. Say that.
All right, finally. USA took on Colombia in what I think was the most anticipated quarterfinal. The USA took down Colombia 3-0. There's so much to say about this game. We could do an entire episode just on this game alone. I don't even know where I want to start here. I think maybe it's not even game specific. I have to just say, I was appalled at how out of hand this game got. And quite honestly, I hate talking about the refs. I hate spending a moment on it, but we have to, because my biggest takeaway from this game, sadly, wasn't how much I enjoyed seeing the U.S. play, frankly, some of their best football that they've played in the past 4 years, but that actually this game became completely unenjoyable to me because I was biting my nails just hoping that nobody had to get carted off of this field with a massive concussion or something else. And if that's the storyline for me coming out of this game, something really is wrong with how this game was managed and controlled by the referees. And it was right from the jump, from minute 0.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said there. I think it was terribly controlled by the referee. I think that they needed to step on the game quicker. There needed to be yellow cards produced earlier in the game to stop that from happening. There wasn't. I mean, we look at the penalty, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but we look at the penalty and how long it took for the penalty to actually get taken. And then once the ball's put down on the spot, the Colombian player comes back into the area. It's like big gamesmanship. That's a yellow card. You need to produce a yellow card because now the ball's on the spot. Everybody else is out. that's time wasting, and also it's encroachment. You need to book that player.
100%. That
And you
was
set a
Carolina
standard.
Arias, by the way, who was causing, in my opinion, a lot of problems across the board on the field in terms of off ball, what should have been plenty of yellow cards. And I don't want to sound biased here. Like Trinity Rodman, she should have been sent off the field within the first half as well. She was way too hot headed for this game. A second yellow, what should have been a second yellow card was not given to her in like the 20th minute or something like that. This game was completely out of hand. So many cards missed across the board on both sides. But I have to say, and you can check me on this, Amy, if this is my US bias, I was kind of appalled at how Colombia handled themselves. I lost a little bit of respect for them in how much they were flopping, rolling around on the field, the antics that they had on display, as you just mentioned, during the penalty kick, and just frankly, how heavily they leaned into the dirty play of it. It's fine to be physical. Go be physical. That's fine. But for me, we've talked about how Colombia in big games, they lose their head. They lost their head against England in the World Cup. I mentioned that last week. They've lost their heads against Brazil already in the group stages when they played Brazil, and they lean into the physicality of it. And that's exactly what we saw here, and we saw it early on. And granted, these two teams, they don't like each other. They've got a history of it. Abby Wambach got in a fight once with a Colombian player. I can't remember who because I don't have it pulled up. But I'm so sorry to say, and tell me if it just sounds like I'm being bitter, but I feel like they were young and they played like they were young and not in a good way. And for me, they're too technical of a team. They're too gifted of a team to be focusing on what they're focusing on, which for me felt like first came physicality and second came their own tactics. And it needs to be the other way around.
I don't think you're wrong at all. And as somebody who doesn't particularly enjoy watching the US win, I said to my group of friends that Colombia's antics were making me want the US to win. So that's how bad it was. I watched the Brazil Colombia game in the group stage, and my exact thoughts were Colombia are anti football. They're not playing football. They're not trying to play football. Yesterday, they weren't trying to play football either. What they're trying to do is any gamesmanship tactics, anything aggressive to put the USA off, to try and level the playing field. Because at the end of the day, there is a huge difference between the two squads, right? The
Yeah.
talent levels and the capabilities. But you're doing yourself a huge disservice on the world stage, because people are now looking at you rolling around on the floor. I think there was one example where Alex Morgan stepped on Arias's
My
foot,
gosh.
and it was embarrassing. It's
It was.
embarrassing. And I lost a lot of respect for Colombia there, because the respect they gained as the darlings of the World Cup is
Mhm.
going out the window now because of the way
Yeah.
they're playing in this tournament. We're not even talking about Caicedo. I don't
No.
think we've mentioned Linda Caicedo this whole tournament because they're
Nope.
not playing football. They're not
No.
giving her the opportunity to do anything, because half the game is spent with their players rolling around on the floor, trying to get players sent off, trying to get players yellow carded.
Yep.
And I don't understand what the rules are anymore of the game, because in the WSL and in the Premier League, the men's Premier League in England, anytime somebody calls for a yellow card who flashes their hand up in the air and asks for a yellow from another team is immediately booked for that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be happening in this tournament. And it confuses me, because, again, if Colombia is continually asking for yellow cards, those players should also be yellow carded. I don't
I agree.
disagree. I don't disagree with Trinity Rodman's sending off. She should have been sent off.
Yeah.
They got to Trinity Rodman, and
Yep.
after that moment where she should have had the second yellow, Trinity Rodman went into a shell. She didn't play anymore.
Right.
Besides setting up the third goal, I honestly, Trinity Rodman became like a shadow of the player she was. And at one point they called the athletic training staff on, and I was like, is Trinity Rodman hurt, or does she need a minute? And I
Yeah.
didn't know whether it was she would just couldn't handle the emotions of the game anymore. She was genuinely, there was something wrong, because I did say there's something wrong with Trinity Rodman. She's not being aggressive anymore. She's not
Yeah.
stepping to the ball. She's not doing anything. And so they did take her off at half time. So I think that it was either because of the fact they didn't want her to get sent off, or there was something else going on, which I don't disagree. There might be something going on with her
It's a
at that
double-edged
point.
sword for Trinity Rodman,
Mm.
I feel like, because she was on it at the beginning of the game. And part of what makes Trinity Rodman good in those moments where she's brilliant is she's got that fire and she's got that competitive spirit, and she will use that to her advantage. And I think we saw that play to her advantage for 10 minutes, and then she lost her head. And granted, she was getting into it on the sideline, and Colombia were getting to her. And in that moment, we saw it flip and we saw it almost become her kryptonite. And it destroyed her, frankly, from the inside out, I think. And you're right. Once she should have gotten that second yellow, she wasn't able to develop play like she was doing before. I thought she should have been taken out a lot earlier, but it bums me out that this is what we have to focus on. And that was my overall takeaway after that game was I'm so upset that I didn't even really enjoy watching that game because of all of these extra things that we're talking about. And we can get into the details of, this person should have had a yellow, this person should have had a red, so on and so forth. And we could spend all day doing it because there were so many missed calls. It's just across the board, honestly. But in the moments we have, let's talk about both these teams and let's talk about this game specifically. Do you want to start with the US or do you want to start with Colombia? Because I feel like I want to talk about them both separately.
Let's start with the US.
I was hoping you would say that. The US coming off of a really big loss to Mexico coming into this game. I think everybody was like, okay, this is the moment. What are we going to see from the United States? Are we going to see a US that honestly collapses, or are we going to see a US that comes back fighting? And if you thought that they were going to collapse, you don't know this team, because this is where my love is going to start shining through as Amy rolls her eyes. Let's talk about this, because I don't even know where to begin with the US. Perhaps I don't even know where to begin with the US.
Let's start with the back four, because I want to talk about the back four, because everyone's gonna talk about the 3 goals, and okay, we'll get onto that.
I didn't actually want to talk about the goals at all. I just wanted to talk about personnel.
Right, okay, so let's talk about personnel. Let's talk about the back four, but let's also talk about Alyssa Nair, because I have said this to you, and nobody has validated
this is going to be your I'm right moment, Amy, and then I'm going to have my I'm right moment. Okay, so great. Go for it.
Okay, so Alyssa Nair has never been my favorite goalkeeper. I'll admit that, hands up, and I've criticized her when she's needed to be criticized. But Alyssa Nair has been the US's best player for probably the last 2 years, and nobody is coming out and saying it, and I don't know why. Why is nobody saying Alyssa Nair has been the best player for 2 years? What's going on here? Because you're looking for people, you're looking for leaders. Alyssa Nair, I know she's not vocal, that's not her game, but look at what she did yesterday. She kept the US in the game.
Yeah.
Two unreal saves.
Ridiculous saves.
Against Mexico, it could have been way worse than it was if it wasn't for Alyssa Nair. Mm-hmm. So I think that we have to talk about Alyssa Nair. She's in what? She's 36, is she? I think
she's 35 or 36, yeah.
35, 36. This is her 100th cap for the US, which seems crazy that she's been playing for so long. She only had 100 caps, but flawless performance. Technically outstanding. The saves that she made, especially the one where she had to react quickly to that first-time shot where it comes across the box and she dives down to her left. That is a world-class save.
Mm-hmm.
So, Alyssa Nair, hats off to you.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more. And now my moment for my I'm right. And if you listen to last week's podcast, you heard me say it. The back four of Naomi Girma and Tierna Davidson holding down the center, Jenna Neiswanger and Emily Fox on the outside, is our strongest back four right now for so many reasons that, again, I said it must have been a good episode last week. I said so much good stuff. I keep referencing it. All right. Let's say it quickly here. On the outside, you have the young Emily Fox and the young Jenna Neiswanger. Jenna Neiswanger, for those who don't know, she played forward her whole life. She played that attacking wing position. She was converted to an outside back by Juan Carlos Amaros, her head coach at Gotham FC. And you know what? Thank God that happened, because I think right now we've got one of the best left backs in the world developing in Jenna Neiswanger. Absolutely incredible talent. And what these two provide, aside from, frankly, very strong defense, and the way Emily Fox was able to read some of the attack that Colombia was orchestrating was just mind-boggling to me. But the way they can step up, the way they get forward, that's what the U.S. need. They need their width. They need their attacking presence. And that's exactly what happened in this game. And then in the center, Naomi Girma and Tierna Davidson, not only are they fantastic center backs, and Naomi Girma is one of, if not already, the best center back in the world, not the best, one of the best center backs in the world, I'll say.
Calm down.
Yeah,
Take it down a level.
I do need to future captain of the U.S. women's national team for sure. I said last week, and I'll say it again, and we saw it in this game. What they provide, another element of their game, is their distribution out of the back. And I would love to continue to see these back four gel together. And let me continue on my I'm right soapbox by adding that in the midfield, Corbin Albert, we hadn't seen her a lot, and this is a very young player. She's 20 years old. We haven't seen her a lot in this country because she plays in France. And
yeah, PSG.
And we didn't know how she was going to perform. And she has been one of the key midfielders for the U.S. in this tournament. And I think that without her in the midfield here, this game would have been very different.
I like Fox and Nyswanger provide a nice balance at the back because you have a left-footed player playing left back, who she scored, right? She came forward and she scored with her left foot. Unreal finish.
Oh my God.
And we've been watching her for Gotham this season doing the same thing. So this is not a surprise to me. And also the Davidson Nyswanger combination on that side is exciting for Gotham. And then on the other side, Emily Fox, who we talked about Linda Caicedo before this whole talk about the US. Linda Caicedo barely did anything. She had one nice ball over the top in behind Nyswanger early on, which could have changed the game if Clumber had scored there. But other than that, we have to say that Fox, Germer on that side kept Caicedo real quiet, and we didn't see the best of Linda Caicedo this tournament. I'm going to say that, but
no, we didn't.
And then Corbin Albert coming in, and again, like you said, we don't really know too much about her because I don't watch a lot of the French league. I will watch the bigger games, the OL and PSG or those types of games. I will watch the highlights of because I think that they're really good games. But she's definitely come in and made a case for herself to start in that position. I still don't think Lindsay Horan is the answer, but she's the captain of this squad, so there's not much I can say about that. They're not going to stop playing Lindsay Horan, but I was saying Jaden Shaw needed to start, and Jaden Shaw started and again scored, and I think was his 4 goals in 4 games for her or something like that, something ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think she's had 4 goals in 7 appearances.
That's an insane stat for how young she is.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is Alex Morgan. So
good, because that's exactly what I was about to say. And I'm so excited to talk about Alex Morgan. Let's do it, Amy. Go on. Okay,
so
express
Alex
your
Morgan.
love for how Alex Morgan played in this game, because it's got to be nothing but positive. And it's gonna make my ears sing to hear you say this.
It does make my ears bleed to hear it, but I mean, obviously, we know Alex Morgan is probably in the top 3 strikers in the world, right? But just of her game and how we know she's played before, she's, as the commentators kept mentioning time and time again, she's 34 years old now. She's had to adapt and change the way she plays a little bit because when you get older, you do have to change your style of play, right? You can't be that dynamic player running in behind all the time or just purely ghosting people for speed. That's not who you are anymore. You're also more rounded as a footballer, right? The more experience you get at different levels and different clubs and international football, you become a different player. You become, more mature. So what we're seeing is a mature Alex Morgan now. And I think that this is what the US needed, right? So we keep talking about this US dynamic front line, but they don't work. It doesn't work. It kind of just, I don't know. There's been games where it's just like, well, this doesn't work for me. And I think that they needed Alex Morgan to come into this game specifically and be this, and for lack of better person to name in the women's game, Harry Kane. She's their Harry Kane. And what she does is she brings leadership. She brings she brings a maturity, but she also brings this, I can play passes too in behind, and I can be the player who flicks balls on, like we saw for the Nyswanger goal, where she just she didn't flick it, but she got in the way of the player and it sort of like diverted off of their head and fell to Nyswanger. But she still can be direct and she can cause problems in behind. And what I think she does is she brings that front line together and she's the glue that was holding them together as a front 3. And obviously you're loving this.
I'm absolutely loving it. And I've also got more to add. I'm just loving this. Listen, I'm not going to make it a big thing. For a moment, I was going to make it a big thing for all of the people who have always thought that Alex Morgan was overrated. But here's what I'm going to say. First of all, I think we need to start calling her Mama Morgan now because she
That's
was
gross. I'd never call her that.
she was just the we're in so many ways she was the president that the US needed. And I'll get on to tactically, but I have to start with emotionally as well because this was a fiery game. This was a game that the US could have very easily lost their heads. And specifically, Alex Morgan could have lost her head because she was getting absolutely trampled upon. Just people sticking in from the back into her heels. And I mean, somebody absolutely could have gotten hurt in this game. And Alex Morgan kept her head about her. You could tell that everybody was taking a cue from her because she was the one who was getting, honestly, probably beaten up the most. And for her to do that, and we talked about the penalty kick and the antics that Colombia had. Alex Morgan stood on the spot with the ball, knowing she wasn't going to take the penalty kick. She stood on the spot with the ball and just stood there to allow Lindsey Horan not have to be at the spot. Lindsey, go do whatever you need to do mentally. I'm going to stand here with the ball. I'm going to make sure Colombia doesn't, mess with the field around here. And I'm just going to stand here until everything's done. In so many ways, emotionally, she's the glue that was needed in this squad that honestly, it's what the captain's supposed to be doing. And she still, in many ways, is that captain. She was 2019 captain, and she still kind of has that, whether even though she wasn't brought into this squad initially, she came in because Mia Official tore her ACL. She really is still an emotional captain. Now, tactically, the thing I've always given Alex Morgan credit for that I think is a part of her game that she doesn't get enough credit for is her hold up play. And that is, I think, what changed the game in this win for the United States.
Yeah, she's able to hold the ball up and bring people into play, and that's what I was just kind of making the point about the dynamic front line is that they don't necessarily hold the ball up very well or bring other people into play. So it kind of then just becomes them running at people, and that sometimes it works, but it hasn't been super successful for the US, I would say, so far. And maybe they need to figure out in certain games, like, okay, that is the tactic we can use. But in other games, that's not the tactic we can use. And also, I think what Morgan's done is, I don't know if she was in Emma Hayes's plans moving forward. Who knows? We don't know
She
that.
is now.
She is now. Of course she is. She's said to Emma Hayes, right, I'm still here. I'm still here. And you need me. Yeah. And that's what she did in this game. She was a leader, like you said, and that maturity shone through. And
Mama
I think
Morgan.
God, we have to call her that. She's gonna, if she ever listens to this podcast, she's gonna hate that.
I think she'll like it.
I think that Emma Hayes has now got another dynamic that
it's
she
another
can look
element.
At.
Absolutely. Look, anybody, not anybody. I'm going to just keep referencing the 2019 squad because that's a squad that won the World Cup. When you look at all of the different lineups, there wasn't a starting 11 that played every single game. What Jill Ellis had is players that could slot in different elements and change the way the team was going to play within this structure that she had created, depending on the opponent. And that's a different element that Alex Morgan now provides. And I agree. I think she's completely played her way into Emma Hayes's plans, and it's absolutely beautiful to see. I think it's interesting while we're touching on the number 9 position that it's very clear that Emma Hayes does like Sophia Smith more as that number 9 and that point player more so than on the wing. I actually prefer Smith on the wing, and especially when you're getting more width from your outside backs, allowing Smith to kind of pinch in a little bit and dribble at players. I would have liked to see that. I wished, honestly, that she'd come in for Rodman a little bit earlier in the game.
But then that poses a problem. Like, who does she play at 9 if Morgan's injured or unavailable? Because there isn't
she could be both, really. Like, I like your idea of the dynamic element and switching off. Do you want Morgan? Do you want Smith at the 9? I think it's weird that we've only seen Smith at the 9. That's the only position we've really seen her in this tournament. And I'd like to see her more on the wing because she can do both.
Yeah, I'm yet to be sold on anyone else at the 9 except for Alex Morgan at this point. So
yeah.
That's saying something about the other players. I mean, I really like Jaden Shaw, and I don't know if she's going to be the 9, if she could play the 9.
Really, she should just stay exactly where she is, do exactly what she's doing. Just stay right there.
Okay. I mean, fair enough. She's doing what she's doing and she's scoring the goals. But also, I really like Olivia Moultrie, and I really want to see more of her. I mean, this may not have been the game for her, but she came on, she had a chance, she should have scored. But
I thought she was playing far too slow for this game. When she came on, she was just holding the ball up at her feet far too much.
well, she's coming into the game, and this game was chaotic, right? So
Yeah.
I think it was a lot to ask of a young player getting thrown into this. But from what I saw of her in the opening game, I liked what she had to offer. So I wanted to see a little bit more of her, and she's got a long way to go to develop. She's young too, so I don't think we're going to see too much of her for the rest of the tournament. But somebody who I'd like to see more of would be her.
All right, let's get on to Colombia. I think we touched on a lot of it in the higher picture of Colombia in that, what I said that they're too talented and they're too gifted to be focusing on this physicality element of the game. And that's my big picture takeaway for Colombia. But let's get a little bit into the game and what they've been doing here. And I know specifically you really want to touch on a really big absence in the front line of the Colombia attack, which is Myra Ramirez, who has stayed with Chelsea, and we haven't seen her in this tournament. And it's very clear that Colombia are missing her big time.
Yeah, she was the standout player of. I mean, but we talk about Linda Caicedo, but I think Myra Ramirez was actually
Yeah.
the standout player for Colombia of the World Cup. Just her ability to hold the ball up, to run into the channels, to cause problems, score goals. We're seeing that for Chelsea now, and for me, it's a little disappointing that she wasn't able to be at this tournament. I do understand why she wasn't at this tournament. I mean, I think the loophole that Chelsea exploited with Colombia not being a CONCACAF team, so that she would have to come back within after the group stages, which is understandable because Chelsea do not have a striker right now that they can rely on except for Myra Ramirez. They have obviously Kerr and Fisher with ACL tears. So I think for me, on a personal level, and for those watching this tournament, it was disappointing that Myra Ramirez wasn't in the Colombia team. And for her personally, I don't know how she feels about it because I know that she's very proud to play for Colombia, and I think she's probably torn in two different directions because she just signed for Chelsea and she wants to prove herself to be one of the world's best strikers. But do you want to explain the loophole, Sarah? Because you seem to have a good hold on this, better
Sure.
hold
So
on
I'll,
it
I'll try
than.
to do it shortly and simply. Essentially, this tournament is run by CONCACAF, which is the North American governing body. And the South American teams that are in this tournament in Colombia, Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina are not part of CONCACAF. They have their own governing body under FIFA. And so, per the rules, players are only required to be on international duty within the normal FIFA window, which is the window that all of the European players and teams were playing in. So that was, I don't have it up, but I believe it was 9 days. And so the loophole that Chelsea exploited was that because Colombia are not a part of CONCACAF, all of their players technically can go back to their club team at the end of the international window. So Chelsea essentially said that, hey, if she goes, we're going to recall her on February 28th, which is the end of the international window, which would have meant that she would have been a part of the Colombian team for the first few group games. And then, should Colombia have made the knockout stages, which they did, she would have had to leave. So essentially, what Emma Hayes did is make a deal with Colombia and say, hey, we're going to recall her. So I think it's best for you that you just, have your team for the tournament and not call her in because that's a spot that's not going to exist if you make the knockout stages. Everybody else that's playing on Colombia, Brazil, at this point, for all four of those teams, if they're still in the tournament, they're there because their club and their country have had a mutual understanding that even though the FIFA window has closed, they're going to stay for this entire tournament. And that's clearly not what happened with Chelsea and Colombia. Was that a clear explanation?
Yeah, it was definitely succinct,
Okay.
and it makes me question why Manchester United have allowed Jace to stay there when clearly they needed her this weekend after another average display, I would say. But I'm not here to
It
talk about
is
Man United.
it is a loophole, and I think you're right to question, how would players feel about that? And I think it is the right thing for clubs to do, to let their players go play with, their countries. It's a big honor. They've been called up, and this is a really important tournament for all of these teams. And so, loophole exploited by Emma Hayes. Well done. But yes, very much missed Myra Ramirez for this Colombia team. And despite her youth, she's only 24 years old. I can't help but think that she would have brought a very level-headed element to this squad that frankly was much needed.
Do we think Emma Hayes was playing playing a little bit two
Did
ways
she want
here.
the US to win?
Yeah, exactly. Did she just say like, let's keep Mara Ramirez here so the US can win this competition?
That's really
I
funny.
I just I was disappointed that Mara Ramirez wasn't there, because I think that with Mara Ramirez, Colombia offers something different, and maybe they wouldn't have been so hell bent on going out with these tactics to just kind of anti-football, break up the game, be aggressive,
Yeah,
and that we may have seen something a football team out there as opposed to a rugby side, which is what we saw for most of this
completely.
tournament, I would say.
Yeah.
So all in all, very disappointed with Colombia. Not the results, but just the way they played. Just the way they played.
I think what I'm most disappointed in is, this is a new head coach since the World Cup, and I don't like the direction that we're headed in with this new head coach. It's clear that the focus on tactics isn't there, and the ability to help your team control their emotions and be on the field in these big games and those learning opportunities, it's not there. And for a team, like I said, I'll be a broken record, with so much talent, with so much potential, that's what's most disappointing about this. It essentially felt like this team turned into a two-player threat, right? They were like, we have Linda Caicedo and we have Uzme, and those two players are going to orchestrate the attack. Well, you've got talent across the entire field, and you don't have to focus on those two players. You don't have to focus on the physicality of it. And yeah, I'm very disappointed in Colombia in this entire tournament. And I really hope that this is not the direction that they head in. And that is it for us here. Don't worry, our regular episode is still dropping tomorrow, Wednesday, with even more Gold Cup content and, of course, WSL coverage. For Amy, I've been Sarah. Thanks, everybody.